And we're live. Good morning, everybody. It is Friday. Congratulations. You made it through the week. Another successful week in the world of food quality and food safety. If you're joining us live, welcome. We're super happy to have you here. My name is Bryan Armentrout. I'm with the Food Leadership Group, and I'm a consultant in the food safety space. And every week at this time, so 8 a.m. Mountain Time, which is where I'm at, and 10 a.m. Eastern, which Melody is at, we have a food safety chat, and we get together and we talk about a different subject on food safety with an expert in the field. And I'm very happy to have Melody here. So welcome, Melody. So glad to
Thank
have
you,
you.
Brian. Thank you. Glad to be
So
here.
Melody and I was thinking about this before we got on the show. Gosh, how long have we known each other now?
I don't know, definitely 10 some years.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah,
so
10 plus years at
yeah,
least.
I was on the SQF Technical Advisory Council at the
Yeah,
time, representing White Wave Foods and Dean Foods, and Melody was a young up and comer at SQF, doing a lot of the data analysis,
data, yes,
all that
looking at
stuff,
the
putting together the
results.
reports, all those things, and trying to
Yeah,
answer the million questions that came your way, which was always a
right.
ton of fun.
Yeah,
So if you're new to the food safety chat, first off, the first thing that you're going to notice is this is not your normal presentation. This is not a bunch of PowerPoint slides or other information that's slapped up on a screen. This is a conversation. And so what you'll notice here, and this is something we absolutely love about doing this, is it's interactive. So part of this and what makes these shows so much fun and so enjoyable and worth your time is the interaction and getting to know other people within your groups. So we're live streaming on YouTube and on LinkedIn. And this is a great way to build your network and contact with other food safety people, because one of the things that we say all the time, and I know Melody understands this and believes this as well, is food safety is not a point of competition. We're all in this together within food safety, right? We're protecting public health. We're making sure that things go correctly, because if something goes wrong in one business, it impacts us all. So we need to be hyper involved. And so it's great that conferences are starting up again. It's great they're able to get out and talk face to face. So if you have a chance, talk to your boss, get the tickets, go out and meet your fellow food safety people, because you'll always learn something new. So one of the things that we love to do in the chat is, and people are already doing it, which I absolutely love, is let us know where you're at in the world. And so Tim, of course, is in Minneapolis. Thank you, sir. Always great to see your smiling face here. And of course, Austin, with his fantastic work he is doing with food safety culture and training out here in
that's a big
Colorado.
show to fill. Austin did a great job last time.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. And Instant Laurent, welcome from Florida. California, Kim out in Vegas, Robert,
Robert,
one of the great people in the food industry is Robert
I
Prevendar.
learned a lot from Robert.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
and so Robert is a great guy. So we're really happy to have you here. Brian Ravitch, friend of ours as well. He works with me in the past with different consulting projects. Brian, big expert in seafood and FDA and foreign supplier verification. So if Melody, right, this is a good example of making connections, right? So Brian's an expert in that area. Gina, Don, Allentown, Jennifer. Always good to see Jennifer. She's a leader in the food industry as well in the space of food products around potatoes and things like that. So that's really cool to see her. Person joining us from the UK, Austin, Texas. Wow, we got a great group here, Melody. I think people have a lot of high expectations, so that's good. So one of the things that I always forget to do, because I get super excited, Melody, is I want to jump into the topics right away. But before we do, everyone, please pick up your favorite beverage and join us. And that is a beautiful Hawaiian mug. Mine is my standard kind of dirty looking mug I got there.
It's
Ew.
the
Okay.
magics.
Yeah, so please join us. Annie, welcome. Oh wow, so Mohammed in Qatar. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Middle of the night over there. So that's the awesome part about this, right? Is we can connect with people around the world. And one of the things that we all know really, really well right now is just how interconnected food safety is. Because one of the things, there's a client of mine that I work with, and this is a very common thing in the food industry right now, is supply chain issues, Ukraine's impacting all these type of things. So if you happen to use sunflower oil or other type of agricultural products, man, this is really messing with your supply chain, because now all of a sudden you can't get sunflower oil because that mostly comes from Ukraine. So there's a lot of scrambling going on in the food industry relative to that. So as quality and food safety professionals, be hyper vigilant at this time, because this is a perfect opportunity for food fraud and people to come in and take advantage of these shortages of materials and things like that. So if you work in those spaces, please pay attention to those and make sure that you're being hyper vigilant, as it were. So I think that kind of really segues into what we're talking about today, which is something that's really, really important in quality. And Melody, one of the things that's unique about what we do in food safety and food quality is we get I say this kind of half jokingly, but it's also true, is we get to stick our nose into a lot of stuff, right?
Right.
I mean, normally if you work in procurement, right, you're focused around, finding good suppliers and all these type of things, R&D, legal, et cetera, right? And you have a pretty clear lane on how you do things. Quality is one of those rare groups out there that really, and a big chunk of what we do is you get to step back and you get to look at things at that 30,000 foot level and say, okay, here's how we're doing things. Is this the right way to be doing things? And as I would train my quality managers, Melody, one of the things that I would tell them is it's kind of like you're the conscience of the production facility, right? You're the little angel sitting on the shoulder of the plant manager and saying, okay, this is going well. This is great. We're doing an awesome job here. Or I'm kind of worried about this. Or if something's really serious, saying, whoa, 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 we got to stop. We got to put these things right. And one of the best ways to do that is having organized quality systems and understanding how that impacts the organization. There's a funny rule in negotiations, and that is always write the contract. So what do I mean by that? People believe what they see in writing much, much more than what they're told, right? So if you have a written document that says, oh no, this is what we need to be doing, people recognize that much more as an authority. So you need to be able to have those standards and put them in place. And so having a written quality management system in place is one of the best ways for making sure that people understand the rules of the game. And also understanding this in terms of what it is that you're trying to do. So for example, Melody, we have regulations, right? So you work in seafood. So there's seafood HACCP and regulations you need to follow there. Other companies are going to fall under the Food Safety Modernization Act. But if you're making a low acid canned food, you have other different regulations you need to comply with. If you're selling product into Canada, that's a whole nother set of rules. So you need to understand that framework for your regulatory compliance. The other piece of that then is your quality management system, which kind of sits above that. So then you need to say, what's my objective with this? What am I trying to do? And one of the things Bob used to say at SQF, Bob Garfield, is if you're getting certification for SQF just because a customer is asking for it and you want something to hang on the wall outside of the entrance to your company, don't do it. That's not what it's for. The system is there to help organize how you do things. And one of the most important areas that you're doing that is design control. So, and in an ISO term, relative to how you're producing products and how you're bringing them to market, because that sets everything up. So a big piece of this is, what is your objective, right? So if you have that regulatory piece, which everybody has, now you're like, okay, I need to put a quality management system in place. How do I do that? There's an interesting, kind of conundrum here, Melody, that we're all kind of put into. And that we all come into jobs at a particular point in time. And there's an entire history prior to that. So prior to me coming to work with White Wave Foods or any other company that I was at, there was all kinds of activities that were taking place before I got there. There was somebody who was in my role who was doing things as well. There were crises, there were recalls, there were customer requirements, right? There's all these documentations and all these type of things that were there before you got there. And you need to understand what those things were and why those things were put in place. So part of your objective is figuring out the lay of the land. Where am I at? Where do we need to go? That's super, super important. And I mean, kind of the next piece, Melody, is resources, right? A lot of times in quality, we say, okay, we're going to create a quality management system. And we try and take that all on ourselves, right? And it's not, right? There's nothing that's more difficult than creating documentation or processes without getting input from people. Because then you bring them that documentation and they're like, this is not how I do things, right? Or they ignore it or they don't follow it, right? There's nothing worse than having what I call a hidden factory. somebody on the floor, right? So let's say that I'm new and you're training me, right? And you're like, okay, Bryan, did you go through the HR training and all the documentation in the conference room? Yep, I sure did, Melody. Okay, great. Now let me show you how we really do things, right? If that's where you're at, you're in a lot of trouble because you're going to have failures that you don't even know about. So don't get to that point. So part of this is figuring out the lay of the land and deciding, okay, what direction do I want to go relative to this? And a lot of this, right, is people look at this and they think of this as a really huge, gigantic project. And it is if you try and do it yourself, right? So one of the key steps, and I'm sure you're going through this right now as well, is you need to get an understanding and a buy-in from all the different departments within your company that impact quality. So you need to look at all of these things, and this needs to have visibility for senior management as well. So you need to talk with R&D and legal and communications and operation and production and all these other different groups in your organization to say, okay, how do you do things? And get an understanding of that base of where you're at now. Because there's lots of things in any company that are working really well, right? So you need to understand those things. Don has a good question here. What are the highest SQF scores anybody's gotten? UDC
A
100s
hundred.
every now and then,
Yeah,
right?
a
Yeah.
hundred.
When I see them, I'm always like, really? That's hard to believe, right? That they're doing everything perfectly, and they're pretty rare because a lot of times too, auditors will find things in there that are pretty small, and really that's what I'm always looking for as a successful audit is if, to your point, Don, if an SQF audit takes place and the audit's over and I get the report back from the plant, I'm looking for small things. I want the auditor to say, oh, there's a kind of a bad seal on a warehouse door in the dry warehouse. Okay, well, we can fix that. There's some cobwebs in this area of the offices. Okay, that's not hurting anything. What really sends off alarm bells then, right, is let's say something like, okay, I found errors on your documentation for the your CCPs in your process. Right. Those are the type of things that I do not want. I expect the auditor to find some things, but I want them to be small things. So hopefully that kind of answers your question. It's kind of like environmental monitoring, which we were talking about recently. If I see perfect environmental monitoring all the time, it means that the plant's not looking hard enough, right? Or they're not doing a good job of sampling, or something's not right. So that's always a good way to look at those type of things. One of the questions, Melody, that I get quite a bit, and I'm sure you hear this too, is, oh, okay, okay, I understand that I need a quality management system, and I'm going to go after. We'll stick with SQF for this example. Should I go out and buy a software program right away? What do you think?
Well, so I agree. First of all, Bryan, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure and to come back because you did so well. We started with first, and then now it becomes a well-known industry, well-known series. A lot of you said, I think I really agree. Um, so before we start about quality system, I think first thing I really would like to echo that food safety and quality assurance department is you need to put the nose in every department of the company so you can
Mm,
have a practical system in place. That to begin with. Without knowing every source of the information of the business, you're kind of like working in a silo because ultimately, yes, we're all technical person, but at the leadership of the department, you have to understand the department is supporting as a functioning to support a business. So sometimes we tend to forget finance, like accounting. They help us tremendously to help you change your system, translate it to the number that the business needs to hear. Um, to answer the question of the quality system buying the template, I personally I wouldn't recommend because in order to have a good system, you have to know your business and each operation is unique. um, Food safety and quality assurance are two completely different things although they are on the same department, but we are thinking differently and then we are applying approach differently. Food safety is not negotiable. It's scientific, it's objective, the tolerance, everything, it is what it is. um, quality assurance is based on your operation. That's where we really continuous improvement, like our operation, our product quality. At least that's how I look at it. So to simplify, a lot of times when we see people want, oh, I have a quality management system, but when you look at it, it's really food safety. They build up based on HACCP, or they build up based on the aspects that they can define. But when we talk about quality, it really involves the equipment, the operation, the processing steps, how long you put the product in, like for example, how long you cook a product,
Yeah.
that impacts the quality. And then a template wouldn't help. Like in that case, it really comes from your experience, your own data.
Mhm.
So quality, a good quality system really builds up from your own operation. At least that's how I look at it. So I wouldn't recommend a template.
No, I love it. I love it. That's perfectly said. So number one, my advice is do not go out and buy an off-the-shelf program right away. There's some great ones out there, but until you understand where you're at, they're not going to help you. And it's kind of like that old software saying, Melody, garbage in, garbage out. If you think you can just take all your existing documents and put it in a system and everything is going to be okay, no, that's not going to solve your problems. So you need to have good information to put into the software program. So you need to really evaluate everything first and understand what the organization needs. So I look at, just like you, I look at information in three buckets in your plants and in your corporate headquarters. Is the first you mentioned is food safety, and that's yes or no, right? That's from a quality standpoint, right? So is someone running quality within a company? That's easy, right? That's yes or no. Our pasteurization time and temperature preventive control failed. What do we do? Well, what do you mean? What do we do? Right? It's failed. It's not safe food. There's nothing else to talk about. Food quality is different. Food quality, as you said, Melody, very well, is a business decision, right? And part of our role when we're talking about food quality is to give the organization the data that they need to make the right business decision. And what I always emphasize on that as well, to add on to your point, is that needs to be consumer focused, right? A lot of times companies forget that, right? There's a certain expectation that consumers have relative to the products. And within quality, we have an obligation to understand what those things are. So R&D processes are a really good example of that, right? So marketing and sales come up with some really unique, cool ideas of new products that they think that the consumers will like. And they do studies and they work with R&D. And the consumer says, oh, I really like these things about this product. And this is really good. And I like that the product is creamy or what have you. And then R&D does benchtop trials and they do pilot plant trials and all these things, right? And they develop a product and then they give it back to sales and marketing and they do more studies and get with the consumers and say, okay, is this the product that you're thinking of? And the consumer says, oh, I love it. This is an amazing product. I will buy this all day long. I will feed this to my kids. I will serve this to my grandma. I love this. It's our job in quality then to understand what that is, right? What are those things that consumer cares about? And then making sure that we enforce those things. And if
Right.
something starts going a little off skew, making sure the organization understands that, right? So I like using the coffee example here. So there's a certain flavor attribute I'm looking for the coffee, right? If I like a dark roast or a light roast, or what level of bitterness do I want, cream or half and half, or what am I putting in my coffee? But every morning when I sit down, Melody, there's expectations that I have for that coffee. And if I take that drink and I go, blah, that's not right, right? That's quality. Right? And now let's say I complain, and most people don't complain. Right?
Yeah, right.
Our job in quality then is to interpret that information and make sure the organization understands that. I think a lot of times we get too focused internally on what we think that is. Who cares? It's what the consumer
Yeah.
thinks it is, and that's quality.
I
The
re
other
yeah.
bucket, yeah, the other bucket is operational data. And these are things that are important to run the business, but they don't directly impact quality. So let's say labor rates and pounds per man hour, electrical usage in the plants, production schedules, these type of things are operational processes, right? So it's important to think of your information in those buckets so that you can develop your systems correctly. So
Agree. And another thing I think it's important to know before we even have a quality system is what is the quality standard? What's your expectation? Like you can always have a very 100% perfect product, but is it practical? Like we live in this like reality. So combine as a quality professional, I think we really need to work with the R&D closely. Like yes, I know the product standard is here, and then maybe the reality is here or the reality is here. You don't know, but that the standard of your product is what you as a leader of quality needs to be really keep in mind to set up the quality system.
Exactly. Yes, I kind of envision it like a little puppy, right? So R&D has this little puppy, and they give it to us, and they say, "Take care of this puppy," right? And we're like, "Oh, okay. Well, what does it eat? How much water does it need? How often do I need to walk it?" Right? Our job is to grow and nurture that puppy and get it to that successful, full-grown dog, right?
Yeah.
Um, so with that, Don makes a good point here relative to standards and how you're managing and things like this. Is you need to understand the standard, right? You need to understand the standard better than the auditor, right? So if the auditor starts talking about 2.1 management review, you need to understand all of the requirements and expectations in that and make sure the organization is hitting those expectations. And you need to be able to explain that, right? Simply shoving a document in front of an auditor is a really bad idea, right? You need to say, okay, here's our management review process. Here's how it works within our company. So at StarKist, when we do management reviews, here are the KPIs that we're measuring, our key performance indicators. These are reviewed monthly at the plant level. They're also reviewed quarterly at the corporate level. And at the corporate level, we get together all the business leaders and we present to the board and the senior leadership team within the company to tell them how things are going. This is also an opportunity then where I can explain to them things that within our group we may be worried about, right? So we're seeing complaints trending up, right? Here's why we think that is, and here's what we're doing to fix it, right? That's always a good piece of advice too to throw in there is never, right? So this is just kind of a general management advice, is never go to your boss with a problem that you don't have a solution to.
Oh,
And
right. That's a golden nuggets in general,
absolutely.
not just food safety and quality. That's just in general. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've ran quality assurance at some pretty big companies, and it was very irritating for me if someone came to me simply with the idea that they could give me their problem. Right. It's like,
Yeah.
no, that's not acceptable. You need to come to me with possible solutions. You don't have to have the answer every time, but you need to know the path. So
Yep.
definitely look at it that way. And coming back to our topic then, Melody, right, is that's system thinking, right? How does the system react to these things?
Yeah. And
Um, I'm sorry,
oh,
go ahead.
sorry. No, I was like, it ties back to one of your previous comment that I really think we can elaborate a little bit is the mindset, what Bob says, the mindset of the certification. Like if somebody at the facility just want to get a certification, that's the wrong mindset to begin with, because that will first fail your system right away because you are only looking at what's required without understanding why doing it. And
Mhm.
second, it's a bad foundation of a sustained system. So the
Right,
mindset is always how we prevent this happening. That is based off how well you know the product and you
right.
know the production.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when I'm creating a new process and I'm trying to evaluate a process, one of the things I always do is I pretend like I'm a new employee. So let's say, for example, I'm looking at receiving, and I always start with flow charting the process. People automate how they do things. It's just part of how we are, right? When you become good at something, it becomes natural and it just happens. It's like a really good golfer. I'm a terrible golfer. And if I see a good golfer swing and hit a golf ball, I'm like, oh my God, how did you do that? Right. And everybody's got a million pieces of advice, right? Oh, do this with your wrists and hold your back straight. And, on and on and on. It drives you insane. And the really good golfer will look at you and just say, well, what do you mean? You just hit the ball, right? Because they've automated it. It's the same in processes. When you go and you talk with someone, you go to flow chart out their process, they're going to look at you like you're crazy. It's like, okay, Melody, I would love to learn receiving. And they're going to say, well, what do you mean? Stuff shows up at the dock and you bring it in. What do you want to know? So you have to pull that information out of them. It's like, no, no, no. How do you know a truck is showing up? Oh, well, we have a production schedule. Great. Do trucks just show up willy nilly at any time? Oh, no, no, no. We have receiving hours. Ah, okay, great. Well, you just kind of look out the window in the dock door and wait for a truck? Oh no, no. They call at the front door and then right. So then you start developing this process. And what you're looking for in the process is how does it all work? And what are the decision points in that process? So let's say you have a policy in place that says all full truckloads need to be sealed. And that seal number needs to be on the bill of lading, right? So you get to that step in the process and you say, okay, well, okay, so we have a full truckload, yes. And there needs to be a seal on the back, yes. Okay, what do you do if the seal's not there? Oh, well, and you'll get the answer on what they do. It's like, oh, well, if that's the case, we go and we talk with our manager. Okay, well, what do they do? Well, they're going to get quality and we'll decide what to do. Okay, great. Do you leave it in the truck? Do you put it in the racks? What do you do? Well, that can kind of depend, right? So you start getting into these different variables associated with this. And one of the things that I found that's really important in developing processes is figuring out what to do when things go wrong, right? If you just spend your time documenting how things go right, okay, that's part of it, but you need to document what to do when things go wrong. You will be amazed how much time that solves you. So you need to understand then for your system what it is you have and what it is that you don't have. And you need to look at it too from a standpoint of corporate and plant, because there's different responsibilities at those locations. So if you're at Starkist, a large company with plants and corporate and these type of things, you can start thinking in those terms. But even if you're a small company and you only have one location and everybody is there, at some point in the future, that's not going to be the case, right? So if you continue to grow, you're going to start having new plants and you're going to have co-packers and you're going to have a corporate location and things like that. You need to think about how you're going to organize that information now, right? So corporate functions, R&D, procurement, quality assurance for the corporate functions. So organic compliance, kosher, yada, yada, right? All these different things. You need to do a gap assessment of what you have. It's like, okay, if I look at the SQF standard, what are the different processes and programs that we have and what do we not have? So our early example, 2.1 management review. Do we have a process in place? Yes or no? Yeah, we got some stuff in the plant, right? We have meetings that take place and everybody reviews stuff. Okay, well, great. How's that happen at corporate? Oh, well, we just kind of send emails and talk with each other and whatever, right? Probably not the best thing, right?
I found Annie's comment, one of it. I completely agree. That's a work relationship between QA and R&D. Annie said, I often find we miss the plant's process capacity when building that standards from R&D. There needs to be an assessment of the product handed off to manufacturing that to be realistic, which is true. And then I think the commissioning, when you do the commissioning, it helps align that alignment, pulling the R&D team to do the commissioning sample review together. So that way, at least R&D and QA are on the same page. And R&D developing the process, how the product makes, how the flavor is tasted, but QA still get to do the finished prospects. So that's where the two connect. And then
Mhm.
that when you set up the tolerance, make sure the R&D knows where are the tolerance are, because product comes from lab is completely different as a product coming out from a production. That's for sure. But I think
100%.
commissioning can help in that case to make
Yep.
sure the standard is aligned.
And yeah, it's very important on that. This kind of references back to what I was talking about before. There are internal technical specs of what you expect of the product. And right, R&D is going to have very detailed information on thermal curves and rheology and you name it, right? That's great. Those are all baseline product information that we need to know. But if that's the only thing you do, you're not following through correctly, because all those translate into finished product attributes that the consumer does care about. So, for example, like a soy milk or something like this, I never had a complaint from a consumer that said your pH is slightly high. No, they will write to me and say your product tastes funny.
Or your product color is off.
Right.
So that's you get a lot, and then that's also the leadership will think what triggers that. The more detail, because we have our R&D did a great job that the processing steps, but like what they exactly one of the products does, and that's a good piece of information for QA to identify what is the critical control point for
Mhm.
quality. Like what directly impacted the finished product quality that consumer will directly see. And that's where
Absolutely.
we started. Yeah.
100%. And so Kimberly Dillon has a good question here. It's how does food safety and quality break down the science for leadership without being too basic? So this is an interesting situation, right? So one of the things, whenever you're working in a technical field, so I started off in microbiology. That was my background, right? So I started off in a lab doing all those type of tests and things like that. I haven't done those tests in forever, right? So my role in quality has been in a leadership role. And what Kimberly is asking here is extremely important, because part of what we need to do in Melody, this is a huge part of your job too, is to be able to translate technical information to non-technical people, right? And why it's important.
Yeah, and then this one I have to call out one of the mentor. I look her as a mentor, Ruth. She once advised because I asked the same question, and then she once said, "Just say so what." So it sounds very simple, but I've been using it. So we are very technical, and I just keep asking myself why, until the point I was like, so what? Okay, that's where you answer to yourself how it ties to the business and what the other person wanted to hear. And then it all depends how you commit. It backs to the communication skill. Like you understand your audience. If he's a very data person, then translate it to data. He's a very realistic philosophy person, then make an image abstract to him so that he can understand or see what his background is, and then ties into his department's benefits. It is
Right.
quite important for the leadership to translate technical um, to the business needs, because that's how you get the voice heard. That's really how you get buy-in the senior management
100%. Yep,
commitment.
that's very well said. Because part of it, right, is, and that's part of the role of leadership in quality, is to be able to manage up, as they say, and communicate in their terms. And part of this too is the farther you communicate up in the organization, the more abstract their jobs are, right? So if you're the CEO or the CFO or the VP of operations and things like that, you're thinking about the business very differently. You're thinking in terms of 5 years out. You're thinking in terms of mergers and acquisitions and how are we going to get the next round of funding done and these type of things. And so my advice, Kimberly, and one of the things that I learned, and this was through painful experience, is if you go in with a detailed report for senior management, it's not going to go well, right? You need to have a high level report and data to back it up, so that if the conversation goes to data, you can follow that path. But it's up to them, right? They're going to tell you what direction they want to go. You don't push that conversation, right? Your job is to say, all right, here's what I'm concerned about. Here's a graph that's showing this. And then they're going to start asking you questions, right? And that's part of that communication piece, right? And that's when you become successful with senior leadership. And again, back to our topic for today, that's why having systems and processes in place is so important, because you're talking very complex things, which you need to distill down into very simple points of communication. And that's a hard skill to learn. So you need to
Yeah.
understand then how you do that. And thinking in terms of those organizational buckets that Melody talked about earlier too is really important. Are they asking about food safety? Are they asking about food quality? Are they asking about operations? Which of those three
Right.
things are they asking me about? And
Yeah.
those will help guide your answers.
And then keep
So,
things simple.
yes.
Don't confuse yourself. So a lot of time when we know a lot, we confuse ourselves. So when there's a things happen, just separate safety, quality, or what else, and then we dig in, and that will reflect in your system. That the more you think so I think it's a curve thing. Like you learn a lot, you absorb, you go out and then get all the information, you have all the knowledge, your curve is to the peak. And that's where you started to simplify and digest through, like what really is the root problem and how we divide it and apply in the operation. The more clear the
Absolutely.
leadership is, the more clear your line worker is, because
Right.
they will be very strict. Oh, this is this is that. Let's just do that. Yeah.
Yep.
It sounds simple, but it's hard.
Ah, wow. I love that you said that because yeah, that's a saying that I've had for quite a long time is simple is hard, right?
Yeah.
It's very tempting and in some ways satisfying to write complex 50-page documents. But guess what? Nobody's going to read it. Nobody's going to follow it, right? You need to be able to distill it down to the essentials. And part of I think the Achilles heel of technical people, Melody, is, especially within quality, is we tend to think in terms of systems instead of people. So what do I mean by that? So let's say that you're in a dairy plant and you're making cheese, right? So in our minds, in quality, we're making cheese. Well, guess what? There's nobody in that plant making cheese. There's people receiving ingredients. There's people pasteurizing milk. There's people running the centrifuge. There's people setting
Making
vat,
the box.
making the box,
Yeah.
put it in the filler, cleaning
Mhm.
the equipment, right? There's all different people who have handoffs within that result in the making of cheese. So if you were to create a giant work instruction that said how to make cheese, you're wasting your time, right? You need to think, here's the work instruction on how to receive milk. Here's the work instruction on how to check pH. Here's the work instruction, right? And breaking those things down. I always draw a little stick figure, right? You need to be able to say, Melody is the person doing this job. She needs to know what she needs to do, how to do it, and what to do if things don't go right. And if you can do that, you'll be successful. So hopefully
Right.
that helps to answer that.
Right. And I agree. And I think, but on the other folds, because you always have two sides of coin, right? Because one of the person, if he's too focused on just the steps he's doing, he might lost the picture of the whole process. So I think at the leadership, it's very important you constantly giving the big picture of the whole process to the entire group on why his job is important to support the whole process.
Mhm.
Um, so that everybody is on on the same page as what you are seeing as a leader.
Right. And that's a beautiful way to bring it back to the systems. And that's why we're here, right?
Hmm.
So there was an example in my past that really solidified this for me as I was creating documents in a plant is we had a process where we had a base ingredient and then we would add things to it and then it would go to the filler. And so you had guys who were up there adding the vegetables and whatever into the base and then they would send it to the filling machine. And so you had people who were mixing the stuff and you had people who were running the filler. And if that temperature wasn't within like a plus or minus 2 degree range, it wouldn't fill right. And those two groups, they were in one big room and they would fight back and forth all day long because the people at the filling machine would say, hey, you're sending me over stuff that's too hot. And then they would yell back, hey, if you knew how to run the filler, you wouldn't have the problem. Right. And I watched that for a long time, trying to figure out why that didn't work. And I realized that it's the responsibility of the person upstream to provide the person downstream.
Yeah, I think we lost Brian. I think another thing I would like to elaborate on one thing Brian was saying. Oh, you're back.
Yes, sorry.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm
what happened?
trying to fill in the yeah.
Yeah, all of a
Is
sudden it went blank
that
on my side. Yeah.
yes. Well, one thing also I was just thinking is as a leader, we can be a little bit we have the opportunity to understanding the whole process. So sometimes we can correlate some of the data from the process to study our product quality system rather just waiting on the consumer complaint data. Because
Mhm.
yes, the consumer complaint data is the straightforward data, but it's the afterward. So if we study the data correlation during the process, then it will naturally prevent your consumer complaint data.
Yep.
It's
That's it.
something off topic while you are
Well,
figuring out the question.
how long was I gone? What was the last thing
No,
you heard?
just 2 seconds.
Just two
Yeah, you're
seconds.
good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you make a good point there because and I'll elaborate on what you just said there. You need to think about your data in two buckets. There's reactive and proactive data. right? So complaints is reactive data, right? It's already happened, right? You're just telling the organization what's going on. And everybody should already know that, right? So you shouldn't have to talk about that too much. The more important information is the proactive information. What are the trends I'm seeing? Where is this going? What will happen if this continues, right? The more you can focus on that area, the more you're going to be able to benefit the organization to help them prevent things from happening. So that's super important. So back to the quality system, right? So you understand your regulatory framework. Let's say that you've decided on SQF organization, you've gone through and you've done a gap analysis, right? You're gathering all of that information that you have within the company, because there's going to be a lot of stuff. Now you need to start thinking about how you're going to organize it and saying, okay, how do I control this documentation? Because that's an area that I see in a lot of companies. That's a huge weakness, right? Is that everybody creates documents, nobody controls them. You have obsolete versions, and it's this constant nightmare of trying to run around and control this stuff. And so if you're thinking about developing this quality management system, that's something that you need to think about is, okay, based upon the gap, what do we have? What do we not have? And more importantly, what do I get rid of? Right. So as you go through this, you're going to find, and this has been amazing, Melody, in my career as I've gone through and done this in different companies. As a general observation, about 60% of the documentation is not needed.
Yeah. So technically, that circles back to keep things simple, because
Yeah.
it really is that, do we need that? Why do we need that?
Yeah.
Keep asking why. I guess it's really a good question. And what is it controlling? I think I really agree with Austin's one of the comment is, if you can explain it simply in a simple way, then you didn't know it well. Yes, if you add 100 control points or steps to your product, that means you don't know your product well. What is the key quality attributes to your product? So I guess that the first to really start a good quality system is really to start your quality plan, and it tend to be forgot. People think you have a quality management system, however, you don't have a quality plan that is based off quality control point.
Yep, absolutely. So now you start organizing this information, and you need to have somebody who's responsible for this, a gatekeeper, right? And so you, in that role, right, you need a real pit bull, right? You need somebody who's going to really guard the system and control it. And you need somebody at corporate, and you need somebody at each of the plants who's responsible for the system. Because to your point, right, documents get created in the past. So let's say that a problem happened and somebody creates a document to address that particular problem. Well, now the problem's gone, but everybody keeps still doing that thing, right? To your point, Melody, it's like, why are we doing this? And they're like, well, 5 years ago, somebody, I don't know, right? Okay, great.
It
Let's stop
backs
doing it.
Yeah, it go back to your first comment. You were saying, if you keep doing this, that doesn't mean you're doing the right thing. It doesn't. It really, you just constantly as a leader need to challenge yourself, and then see where is that? What's the current situation? And I think another thing, what I found is the significant difference is, when you do food safety, it's a HACCP. So you do risk, severity and occurrence, and then you got a risk score.
Mhm.
But quality, I think when we look at it, it's the failure point, and another thing is how bad it impacts the business. That's where you really need to. That brings the difference, and that's one key component. It's different that when we assess hazard. That's my opinion.
No, that's a really good observation, right? And so let's say that you're looking at those quality attributes of the product, and let's say that you're making chocolate milk, and you say, okay, what are the things that consumers care about with the chocolate milk, right? So it's okay, it's got the right color, it's got the right mouthfeel, it's got the right texture, it's got the right sweetness, all these type of things that people look for in chocolate milk. Then you would look at your process and say, okay, if I'm controlling the quality of this, where does that happen? So in your process, right? So receiving, processing, packaging, and shipping, batching really is your last chance to impact that, because once you're done batching, it's in the system, right? You're pasteurizing it, it goes into tanks, it goes into fillers, it's done. So if you're a quality manager and you're looking at that, you need to say, okay, my control for quality and those attributes is at batching. So if I'm making a batch of chocolate milk, I need to pull samples from that. and do analysis at that point in time to make sure it's what it should be.
Yep, agree.
Yep.
And then I was seeing some of the comments. It's very interesting. That's a good discussion there, Don and Kim.
Yep. Don's making some really good comments here. Thank you, Don.
Yes. And then I agree, I some sort of agree that training doesn't harm, that just constantly small training. You don't have to like, oh, I'm gonna give you an hour just on micro or on quality, 15 minutes small bites training to the senior leadership team, like at your leadership meeting. It's helpful. Like other department are keeping mind. Like back to your supply chain comments at the very beginning, like sometimes if our supply chain department bring it up on, oh, we have this issue, it's good. You just give a little explanation on, oh, please keep us in loop because quality needs to review the new suppliers. We need to, it's, you don't have to make it like, oh, I'm going to give you a training and then everybody being like a food safety quality training. But like 5 minutes, it's a training, but it's still keep everyone on the, in the loop so that I think one of the goals we can all think about as a leadership is it will be very nice that all other other department head, when there's things happen, they also think about food safety and quality for you. And that would be really nice. And that takes a lot, like a communication. They have an understanding of what's going on. You have an understanding of other departments, what's going on.
Right. And that's where standards come in to very helpful, right? Because now you have something in writing and you can go and talk with the procurement team and say, okay, well, you know, we're becoming certified to this standard. And here are the different attributes that are required to have a good procurement program. Let's go through these and see, make sure that we're doing all these things. And odds are they are, right? Now, part of this then too is understanding that people have different objectives, right? If I'm working in procurement, my job evaluation is different than if I was working in quality. So is that bad? No, of course not. Those two groups need to work together and they need to understand each other's objectives and work for those together. And that training piece of it is super important, right? And like you said, right, you don't have to be fancy or preachy or have a giant PowerPoint. It's just hitting on these particular topics and working with them so that there's an understanding. On that point on training too, there's something that I think that organizations fail at a lot of times. And I think this is our own fault within quality, is that we don't have to train everybody. Okay? A big chunk of training is the responsibility of the person in that department, not us, right? So for example, if I'm Melody's supervisor and she's a new employee on the floor, it's my job to train her on how to do the job properly, right? So here's how you run the equipment. Here's how you do your weight checks. Here's how you do your GMPs. Here's how you, whatever it is within those functions. A lot of times within quality, we think that we need to take that all on ourselves. And a lot of times within organizations, those groups think that it is our job to do those things. It's not. It's not, right? We're there to help with the training. And there's some things that we do training in. So technical areas, right? So here's how you pull samples. Here's how you do aseptic swabbing. Here is how GMPs are done. These type of things. Yes, absolutely. Are we responsible for OSHA training? No. Are we responsible for on-the-job training? No. We'll help those groups with those things, but it comes down to them. So,
yeah. But we are responsible to tell them what's the impact to food safety and quality. So they understand the job they do. Everyone has an impact to the food safety and quality, and that's our job. We need to tell them the impact.
Yep. And that's why quality systems are so important. And that's a great way to put it. We help them understand the rules of the game, right? We help set the rules, and then they need to follow the rules. And that's why auditing and internal audits and these type of programs are so important, is to help them get to that point. The story, I'm pretty sure I've told the story on the chat before, so please indulge me if you've heard this before, is when I was younger in my career, I used to think it was my job to go around and yell at people, right? Hey, you're not wearing your hairnet right? And then I would walk away. And the farther up I got in the organizations, the more difficult that become, right? So I'm visiting a plant and I see a GMP failure. So let's say somebody's not wearing their hairnet right or something like this. And I would go tell them to fix their hairnet, then I walk away. And that person's like, who was that? And they're like, oh, that's the VP from corporate. Don't worry about him. You won't see him for a couple more months. Oh, okay, whatever, right? So what I started doing, right, once I got a little smarter, was I would go and talk with the supervisor for that area and say, "Hi, I'm Bryan. Are you responsible for this area?" Yep, I'm the supervisor for this area. And your team knows GMPs and they follow GMPs, right? Oh, absolutely, 100%. I'm a little confused. Can you please explain to me then why this person over there isn't wearing their hairnet right? Right, and their eyes get big, and then I would walk away. The conversation after I left was the important conversation, right? Because now the supervisor would go up to the operator and say, "Hey, what are you doing? Fix your hairnet." That was a bigwig from corporate, and he made me look bad, right? You made me look bad. Guess what, buddy? I'm watching you, right? You know how to wear that hairnet, and I expect you to do that from now on.
Yeah.
That interaction between the supervisor and his team is critical, right? You're never going to have success if you don't understand that.
Right. Yep. Agree. Agree.
Yep.
And I saw a comment from Sebastian. He said, "You can train all we want. If the perception is bad due to culture or belief that it will improve performance, then training becomes like stabbing water." I don't want to make it sound like everything can be solved from a training, but it's also sometimes I guess it's just like Brian was using an example. It's a conversational thing as well, and then also it is how you appear as a QA people. One thing I'm trying to influence, at least from my own position, is that I don't want them look me at I am someone a cop. I'm just here telling you you didn't do right. You got to do this. No, and then I try to understand the worker's position, their environment, the environment they're working in, the job they're doing, why they're doing what went wrong. And I want to give an impression that I'm here to give you a resource. So though the training, the knowledge is embedded in the conversation. And I'm definitely QA wouldn't appear like, oh, I know it all. I'm the creating the SOPs. I'm just here and telling you. And then it didn't create a good appearance. This type of training is also depending on how you communicate to the line people, to the middle management, to your supervisors, to your senior management. Sometimes it's a conversation. Sometimes it's just a chat. Sit down. Hey, what went wrong? Is any challenges? You will find surprise how your line people and employee telling you why they are doing those type of error.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
There's usually a reason, right?
Yeah, there's
So
always a reason that you probably missed, or sometime. Yeah.
absolutely. So, and this is what's interesting about what we do, right? So we'll kind of bring this back to the 30,000 foot level to help summarize this because we're touching on a ton of subjects here. And this is why this is so challenging, right? Because you're bouncing between two different worlds. You're thinking of these things strategically, right? So you're up here. What's the right path for the company? What's the right organizational structure? How is information communicated, right? All these high level activities. And also that impacts the tactical, right? The day in, day out of how you're actually running the business, which is why this is so super important, right? We're setting the rules of the game of how the company operates, just not quality, just not to get an audit score, just not all these things, right? This is how we want to do business, right? So currently I'm working with a client of mine and we're looking at their process of consumer relations, right? So when a consumer calls up with a complaint, how is that handled? How is information gathered? How is that categorized? How do they respond? Because that's a critical point for companies. We all know that as consumers, right? If I call a company, number one, if I bother to complain, that's huge, right? For every person that complains, right, there's probably 10 or 20 who don't. And how I handle that is very important. And we all know as consumers that if I feel that complaint wasn't handled properly, I'm going to tell everybody, right? It's just like, don't deal with that company, right? And now all of a sudden sales start going down and we don't know why. So that interaction is super important, and how that information then is shared within the company. Guess what? That's quality management systems, right? Of determining that and being able to figure out what's the best way to respond back to the consumer. What's the best way to let the organization know that we're getting this feedback? Because just like the coffee, it's the same thing, right? If we changed our manufacturing process for roasting the coffee and now it's bitter, and the consumers are complaining, man, we need to get that information in the organization as quickly as possible so that we can course correct and get it back to what the consumers want. And that's what it
Yep.
all comes down to, right?
Hmm.
And I think this goes back to, yeah, the simple is hard, and Austin's comment around complexity, right? If you can't explain it, you don't understand it, right? So part of what we're doing with these systems is making the complex understandable, right? And breaking it down into these little sections. And a quality management system is how you do that.
Yep. Yeah. Completely agree.
Yeah, let's see here. So Annie said, I have asked our quality teams to transition from police to teachers and coaches. This helps with the buy-in of the organization. We always follow up with the why. Yep. Absolutely, 100%. Part of this too, and we're, wow, time flew, Melody.
I know.
Part of this too, right, is this can be overwhelming, right? This is a huge undertaking. Number one, right? Don't do it on your own, right? This is a company effort. This is not a quality effort. Just because it's called the quality management system, right? It's the company management system in a lot of ways. And you need to bring in all these different groups and get buy-in and get understanding before you do anything. If you act like Moses coming down from the mountaintop with your declaration of how things will be done, you're going to be in for a real big disappointment because people aren't going to follow it, guaranteed. So you need to get involvement and you need to do this, right? And that's why, you know, these chats and this type of thing is so important, because this is a great way to share information and hopefully prevent headaches, right? Because everything that we're talking about, Melody, and I'm sure you would agree with this comes from painful experience, right? This comes from doing things the wrong way and then realizing, oh, God, what was I doing? No, this is not right. And then having to relearn it and do it. So part of the advantage of working together and collaborating across industries for food safety is hopefully we can help others avoid those mistakes. And that's why I applaud everybody for being here and joining us, especially live. Thank you to everybody for these conversations, because they're super important, right? And making this part of your ritual and how you continuously improve and help your organization grow and improve is super important. And that's why I'm really glad to have friends and experts like you, Melody, who are able to come on here and share your expertise. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I mean, it's always good to learn from the comments and from you. And then sometimes I sitting as well. And I was seeing the comments coming in still. But I think as a leadership, just it's crucial first. I think QA, FSQA needs to be embedded in the larger group. Everyone has a shared responsibility, share the resource. And then we will be able to also um, to identify the trends, and that's where really the defect trends, I mean, like small things happen during your daily operation, and as a leader, that's when you have the expertise and to judge, oh, this is an isolated incident, come on, it's a reality, right? It's operation production, so you will judge this is an isolated incident or this is a trend, oh, there shows a sign of system break, I need to look into it. That's another way to think about it from a
Right. No,
system person. Yeah.
that's a great way to close it, right? So organize first and then simplify. And that's the
Yes.
harder of the two.
Yeah.
So
And don't hide. Sebastian was like, hide under the
ooh,
rock. Never hide. Any problem, let it evolve and then learn from it. Don't hide.
exactly. Yeah. Jif is learning that lesson, right? Don't let these things fester for 10 years. So it can cause huge problems in your organization. It's just a matter of time. So thank you everybody again for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thank you to my sponsor, EAS, a consulting group who does an amazing job with training. And if you're looking for some additional courses from them, go to easconsultinggroup.com/training, and you can check out their courses. And if you use my name, Bryan, at promo code for discount, you'll get 15% off. So win-win. You gotta love that. And I do have another little housekeeping things. So last week I gave away some coupons for some free product. I've still got some left. So I've got some coupons for Ripple Foods. So for some free product in the marketplace that you can go out and try. I mean, they're at Target and some other locations too. So my email is here. The only thing that's missing on the end with this long email is the .com. So if you'd like a coupon for some free product to try a new dairy product or dairy substitute product out there in the market, love for you to try it. Just drop me an email and I'll fire you over a coupon and you can give it a shot. The only thing I ask is right? This is quality, right? So I need some feedback. So let me know what you think of the product, right? So I've tried them and they're really good. So please check that out. And join us next week at the same time. So 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern for the next food safety chat. And as always, an amazing conversation. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. That's what makes this
Thank
thing so
you.
fun. It's amazing, and we enjoy this. And thank you, Melody, my special guest. Thank you for joining
Thank
me.
you, Bryan. Thanks, everyone.
And everybody, we'll see you next week. Enjoy your weekend. Go out and have some fun. Talk to you then. All right.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.